All right, so today we are diving deep into the life of a guy who really shook up the retail world, Saul Price. This is the man who didn't just keep up with changes in retail, he created them with FedMart and Price Club.
And what's really cool is we're going right to the source for this deep dive. We've got excerpts from a biography written by none other than Saul's son, Robert.
Oh, wow. Talk about an inside scoop. I
Mm.
mean, you got to think that adds a whole other layer to the story, right? Having his son share his perspective.
Oh, absolutely. And you can tell right away, Robert isn't just trying to present like a polished textbook version of Saul's life. You really get the sense he's wrestling with this legacy, both as his son and as someone who followed in his dad's footsteps in the business world. It's almost like he's a protege trying to make sense of the giant, you know?
Mhm. Okay, see, now that's what I'm talking about. Family drama mixed with business innovation. Sign me up. But let's rewind to the beginning. Where does it all start for Saul?
1916, the Bronx.
Okay, the Bronx. Not exactly the first place you think of when you picture discount superstores.
Yeah.
So we've got Saul, born Solomon Saul Price, at least according to that birth certificate, and his family decides to ditch the Bronx for the Wild West. Well, San Diego in 1929. It's kind of a classic tale, right? This city kid, dreaming of cowboys and Indians, lands right smack in the middle of the Great Depression. Talk about a reality check.
You know, it's interesting though, because while everyone else is struggling during the Depression, the Price family actually finds a weird sort of stability in San Diego.
Are we really? What do you mean?
So Saul's dad, Sam, was a big union guy, worked in the garment district back east, but he'd contracted tuberculosis.
Oh, wow. And back then that was often.
Yeah, often a death sentence. But Sam, he pulled through. And because of his illness, he started getting disability payments from Equitable Life Insurance. And those payments, believe it or not, they actually provided a safety net for the family that they hadn't had before.
So they had this unexpected financial cushion when so many others were struggling. I wonder how much that impacted Saul's outlook on things.
Oh, I think it had a huge impact. It gave him the space to focus on his education, explore his interests without that constant pressure of having to worry about money. And you can see this line from Sam's union work, fighting for workers' rights, and then later Sol's own focus on creating fair working conditions in his businesses. It's like this idea of social justice was ingrained in him from a young age.
Like father, like son, right? Except instead of following directly in those footsteps, Saul goes and becomes a lawyer.
Right, but not just any lawyer. He made a point of representing the little guy, small
Hmm.
businesses, nonprofits,
Uh-huh.
often working pro bono, helping people who couldn't afford a lawyer otherwise. It wasn't just a job for him, it was about using his skills to make a real difference, kind of like his father did with the unions, right?
Absolutely. And it's really interesting to see, even in those early years, how committed he was to giving back. I mean, here he is still building his own career, but he's already super involved with Jewish charities, the Jewish Welfare Society, the Hebrew Home for the Aged.
And don't forget, this isn't some trust fund kid playing philanthropist. He's still hustling as a lawyer, taking those pro bono cases. It shows us that for Saul, social responsibility wasn't about just writing a check. It was about taking action, about getting his hands dirty for the causes he believed in, values he clearly learned from his parents.
That's a side of him you don't always hear about.
Yeah.
So how does this lawyer, with this passion for social justice, end up in the cutthroat world of retail?
Well, it all starts with a real estate deal that went south. That property Saul bought on Main Street,
Yeah.
the one he couldn't find a tenant for. Well, that's where this whole retail adventure really takes off.
Okay, so we've got a lawyer sitting on an empty building. Not exactly the setup for a retail revolution. What happens next?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. Saul comes across this place called Fedco. Yeah, it was this membership-based discount store. But here's the catch. It was specifically for federal employees.
Oh, interesting. So kind of like an early version of those wholesale clubs we see everywhere today, but only for government workers.
Exactly. And remember, this is way before Walmart, before Amazon, when department stores were still king. So this whole concept was pretty novel at the time, and Saul, with his legal mind, he sees the potential of this membership model. I mean, San Diego's practically overflowing with civil servants and military families, right? So he's like, why not create something similar, but open it up to a much wider audience?
And that sparks the idea for FedMart.
Exactly. But FedMart wasn't your typical department store, not by a long shot.
How's it?
So he basically throws out the rule book. He sets up shop in this bare bones warehouse, ditches all the fancy displays and advertising, and just focuses on offering a limited selection of good quality products at crazy low prices.
He's like hacking the retail system. I bet that ruffled some feathers with the more traditional retailers.
Oh, absolutely. They thought he was nuts. But Sol was laser focused on a specific type of customer, working families who cared more about value than fancy packaging. He even refused to accept those little gifts or freebies from suppliers, like even a free lunch.
Really? Why?
He wanted to make sure his low prices were because he was running a tight ship, not because of some shady backroom deals.
Talk about putting your money where your mouth is. So FedMart starts to take off, but then,
Ah,
well, things get a little rocky, right?
yeah.
Like every successful business, competition shows up, internal politics start brewing.
It's the classic innovator's dilemma. You come in, shake things up, find success, and suddenly you become part of the establishment you were fighting against.
Right.
And that's kind of what happened to Sol. Other discount stores like Kmart saw how well FedMart was doing and started copying his model. And at the same time, some of the people who owned FedMart franchises, they wanted more control, which led to some tension, you could say.
And all of this ultimately leads to Saul getting fired from his own company.
Yeah.
How crazy is that?
It's almost hard to believe, right? The visionary who started it all gets ousted from his own creation. But this is Saul Price we're talking about. This guy was resilient. He could have called it quits, but instead, he decides to double down on his vision and takes everything he learned from FedMart and uses it to launch Price Club.
Okay, so new venture, same Saul. What makes Price Club different? Give us the rundown.
Picture this, 1976, a former Solar Turbines warehouse on Marina Boulevard in San Diego. This place still has oil stains on the floor, but Saul sees potential. That's where it all begins for Price Club.
From oil stains to retail giant. That's quite the image. What's the secret sauce this time around?
It all boils down to two things: membership and the right merchandise mix. See, Saul had this light bulb moment. Instead of just going after federal employees or the general public, why not focus on a specific niche within a niche? He starts offering memberships to credit union members.
Credit unions. It seems so specific. Was that really a game changer?
It was brilliant. It instantly created this two-tier system. You had your wholesale members, like businesses, and then you had your group members, mostly folks from those credit unions, and people loved it. It created this buzz, an air of exclusivity, like they were in on a secret, getting deals that other shoppers couldn't.
That feeling of being part of an exclusive club,
Yeah.
getting that special access, it's still the bedrock of how those wholesale clubs operate today. So it really tapped into something fundamental there.
Right. And Saul also learned from his FedMart experience and revamped his approach to what they stocked on the shelves. He understood that Price Club shouldn't try to be everything to everyone. It was about offering a curated selection of really high-quality stuff, but at prices that would blow your mind. Saul actually had a saying, "We must be right on 6 rights. The right kind of merchandise, in the right place, at the right time, in the right quantity, in the right condition, and at the right price."
The 6 rights. It's like
Wow.
his retail commandments. I love it. And I bet he actually ran the business by those principles, not just talked about them.
Absolutely. Remember how he refused those freebies from suppliers back at FedMart? Well, that commitment to doing business ethically, fairly, it became even more central to how Price Club operated. He treated his employees well, gave them fair wages and benefits, which was pretty much unheard of in the discount retail world at the time.
He saw his business as a way to make a difference, to prove that you could be successful while also being ethical. Something a lot of CEOs today could learn from.
No doubt. So you combine that commitment to his values with a deep understanding of what customers wanted and his sharp business sense, and boom, Price Club explodes. They expand into Canada, but have to get creative with the name because of those French language laws, so they become Club Price up north.
And don't forget about Mexico. Price Club took that market by storm too, which a lot of people thought was too risky.
It wasn't about risk for Saul. He loved Mexico, had a real appreciation for the people and the culture. He saw the potential there, the opportunity to connect with a whole new market.
And let's not forget those impressive stats we talked about earlier. Lower operating costs and higher sales per square foot than FedMart. Price Club was a well-oiled machine, proof that Saul took those lessons from his past and kept innovating, kept pushing the boundaries of what was possible in retail. From those oil-stained warehouse floors to conquering international markets, Saul Price cemented his legacy as a true retail revolutionary. But here's the thing about Saul's story. It doesn't end with just business success. There's this whole other side, a deeply personal side, that we haven't even touched on yet.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Right, because we've been talking about Saul Price, the retail titan, the innovator.
Right.
But there's this other side to him, this drive to give back, to make a difference in the world. And that's something that really comes through in Robert's biography. What was it that sparked that passion in Saul, especially for someone who didn't come from a background of inherited wealth and philanthropy?
Well, Robert actually uses the word guilt when describing his dad's motivations.
Guilt.
Yeah, but not guilt in the traditional sense, like he was trying to make up for past mistakes or anything.
Mm.
It was more like this deep-seated feeling that his success, his good fortune, came with a responsibility to uplift others. Like he almost felt guilty that he had so much when others had so little.
So it's not about atoning for past sins, but more about recognizing his privilege and wanting to use it to give back.
Exactly. And for Saul, it wasn't just about throwing money at problems. He really wanted to understand the root causes of inequality, especially when it came to working people. Remember those early days we talked about him being a lawyer, working with unions, fighting for fair wages? Well, that passion never left him.
And that brings us to a pivotal moment,
Yeah.
both personally and philanthropically, the tragic loss of his grandson, Aaron, in 1989.
It's every parent's worst nightmare. And for Saul, it was a turning point. He could have easily retreated into his grief, but instead, he channeled that pain, that loss, into something profoundly meaningful. The Aaron Price Fellows Program.
And the program itself is incredible, right? It honors Aaron's memory by investing in the next generation of leaders.
Exactly. They take these high school students from all over San Diego, from all different backgrounds, and they put them through this year-long crash course in civic engagement. Seminars, workshops, even sit-downs with elected officials. The whole point is to show these kids that their voices matter, that they have the power to make a difference in their communities.
And it's not just sitting around in classrooms, right? These kids are getting real-world experience.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They work on actual projects that address real issues facing San Diego. It's all about putting Saul's philosophy of action, of social responsibility, into practice, showing young people that they don't have to wait until they're older to make a difference.
It's amazing to see how something so positive came from such a personal tragedy. But Saul's philanthropy went beyond just the Aaron Price Fellows Program, didn't it? He was involved with a whole range of causes.
Oh, absolutely. He was a huge supporter of Jewish organizations, and he was really passionate about trying to build bridges between Israelis and Palestinians. He truly believed in dialogue as a way to promote understanding and peace, especially in a part of the world that's seen so much conflict.
It speaks to that core belief in fairness and social justice that seemed to guide so much of his life, both in business and in his philanthropy. He saw the inherent dignity in everyone, regardless of where they came from or what they believed.
And it's funny because even when he was approached with more general philanthropic opportunities,
Yeah.
he brought that same focus and intentionality. Like there's this story about how the Urban Institute once approached him for a big donation, and they were basically like, "We'd love your support, no strings attached." But Saul, he wasn't satisfied with just writing a blank check. He wanted to make sure his funding went towards research on a specific issue that he felt passionate about: the impact of Hispanic immigration on Southern California.
Wow, that's amazing. He could have just funded something more mainstream, something that would have looked good on paper, but he chose to support something that was really important to him, something that he knew could make a real difference in people's lives.
Exactly. And it all circles back, doesn't it? To his own background, his parents coming to America as immigrants, his own experiences fighting for workers' rights. He wanted to use his resources to shine a light on those issues, to help people understand the challenges and hopefully inspire real change.
Sol Price, the retail revolutionary, the champion of social justice, a man who never forgot where he came from and always strived to lift others up. It's a powerful story that reminds us that success isn't just about what you achieve in your own lifetime, but about the legacy you leave behind. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the incredible life of Sol Price.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure.